All right. Well, I am good to go. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Picking up where we left off last time, we were still in chapter 2. At the very end of it, wasn't shouldn't be too long to on chapter 3. Let's get started. Yet somehow or other, after another long spell of smoking, talking, and roasting themselves before the great fire, the shadow that had so suddenly invaded their peaceful camp began to shift. Perhaps Defago's efforts, or the return of his quiet and normal attitude, accomplished this. Perhaps Simpson himself had exaggerated the affair, out of all proportion to the truth. Or possibly the vigorous air of the wilderness brought its own powers of healing. Whatever the cause, the feeling of immediate horror seemed to have passed away as mysteriously as it had come. For nothing occurred to feed it. Simpson began to feel that he had permitted himself the unreasoning terror of a child. He put it down partly to a certain subconscious excitement that this wild and immense scenery generated in his blood, partly to the spell of solitude, and partly to over fatigue. That pallor, pallor?
Where are you looking?
Hold on.
Palor?
Meaning. An unhealthy pale appearance. Oh, pallor. Huh. That pallor in the guide's face was, of course, uncommonly hard to explain, yet it might have been due to, in some way, to an effect of firelight, or his own imagination. He gave it the benefit of the doubt. He was Scotch.
When a somewhat unordinary emotion has disappeared, the mind always finds a dozen ways of explaining away it causes Simpson. Causes Simpson?
Uh,
Huh.
the mind always finds a dozen ways of explaining away its causes. Simpson lit. Simpson lit a last pipe
No, I
and
got
tried to
that.
laugh.
I feel like
Wait.
that's what I mean.
Yeah, you're right.
It cuts off kind of weird there. All right,
It does.
I'll keep going. It's okay. Explaining away it causes Simpson. Simpson lit a last pipe and tried to laugh to himself. On getting home to Scotland, it would make quite a good story. He did not realize that this laughter was a sign that terror still lurked in the recess of his soul. That in fact it was merely one of the conventional signs by which a man, seriously alarmed, tries to persuade himself that he is not so.
Fago, however, heard that low laughter and looked up with surprise on his face. The two men stood, side by side, kicking the embers about before going to bed. It was 10 o'clock, a late hour for hunters to still be awake.
What's tickling yer?
He asked in his ordinary tone, yet gravelly.
I was thinking of our little toy woods at home. Just a moment.
Stammered Simpson, coming back to what really dominated his mind, and startled by the question.
And comparing them to all this?
And he swept his arm round to indicate the bush. A pause followed in which neither of them said anything.
All the same, I wouldn't laugh about it if I was you.
Defago added, looking over Simpson's shoulder into the shadows.
There's places in there nobody would never see into. Nobody knows what lives in there, either. Too big, too far off.
The suggestion in the guide's manner was immense and horrible. Defago nodded. The expression on his face was dark. He, too, felt uneasy. The younger man understood that in a hinterland of this size there might well be depths of wood that would never, in the life of the world, be known or trodden. The thought was not exactly the sort he welcomed. In a loud voice, cheerfully, he suggested that it was time for bed. But the guide lingered, tinkering with the fire, arranging the stones needlessly, doing a dozen things that did not really need doing. Evidently, there was something he wanted to say, yet found it difficult to get at.
Say you, Boss Simpson.
He began suddenly, as the last shower of sparks went up into the air.
You don't smell nothing, do you? Nothing particular, I mean.
The commonplace question, Simpson realized, veiled a dreadfully serious thought in his mind. A shiver ran down his back.
Nothing but burning wood.
He replied firmly, kicking again at the embers. The sound of his own foot made him start.
And all the evening, you ain't smelt nothing.
Persisted the guide, peering at him through the gloom.
Nothing extraordinary. Indifferent to anything else you ever smelt before. No, no. Man, nothing at all.
He replied aggressively, half angrily. Defago's face cleared.
That's good.
He exclaimed with evident relief.
That's good to hear. Have you?
Asked Simpson, sharply, and the same instant regretted the question. The Canadian came closer in the darkness. He shook his head.
Oh, I guess not.
He said, though without overwhelming conviction.
It must have been just that song of mine that did it. It's the song they sung in the lumber camps and the gods forsaken places like that when they're skeered the Wendigos somewhere around doing a bit of swift traveling. And what's the Wendigo? Pray.
Simpson asked quickly, irritated because again he could not prevent that sudden shiver of the nerves. He knew that he was close upon the man's terror and the cause of it, yet a rushing passionate curiosity overcame his better judgment and his fear. Defago turned swiftly and looked at him, as though he were suddenly about to shriek. His eyes shone, but his mouth was wide open, yet all he said, or whispered rather, for his voice sank very low, was,
It's nothing. Nothing. But what those lousy fellers believe when they've been hidden in the bottle too long. A sort of great animal that lives up yonder.
he jerked his head northwards.
Quick as lightning in its tracks, and bigger'n the bigger'n
And bigger
and bigger'n anything else in the bush. And I ain't supposed to be very good to look at. That's all. A backwoods superstition.
began Simpson, moving hastily toward the tent in order to shake off the hand of the guide that clutched his arm.
Come, hurry up for God's sake, and get the lantern going. It's time we were in bed and asleep, if we're going to be up with the sun tomorrow.
The guide was close on his heels.
I'm coming.
He answered out of the darkness,
I'm coming.
and after a slight delay, he appeared with the lantern and hung it from a nail in the front pole of the tent. The shadows of 100 trees shifted their places quickly as he did so, and when he stumbled over the rope, diving swiftly inside, the whole tent trembled as though a gust of wind struck it. The two men lay down, without undressing, upon their beds of soft balsam boughs, cunningly arranged. Inside, all was warm and cozy, but outside the world of crowding trees pressed close about them, marshalling their million shadows and smothering the little tent that stood there like a wee white shell facing the ocean of tremendous forest. Between the two lonely figures within, however, there pressed another shadow that was not a shadow from the night. It was a shadow cast by the strange fear, never wholly exorcised, that had leapt suddenly upon Defago in the middle of his singing. And Simpson, as he lay there, watching the darkness through the open flap of the tent, ready to plunge into the fragrant abyss of sleep, knew first that unique and profound stillness of a primeval forest when no wind stirs, and when the night has weight and substance that enters into the soul to bind a veil about it. Then sleep took him.
Ooh.
Do you want to read this chapter? Because there's not much talking in.
Yeah, I got it. Thus it seemed to him, at least yet. It was true that the lap of the water just beyond the tent door still beat time with his was that lessening pulses when he realized that he was lying with his eyes open, and that another sound had recently introduced itself with cunning softness between the splash and the murmur of the little waves.
And, long before he understood what the sound was, it had stirred in him the centers of pity and alarm. He listened intently, though at first in vain, for the running blood beat all its drums too noisily in his ears. Did it come, he wondered, from the lake, or from the woods?
Then, suddenly, with a rush and a flutter of the heart, he knew that it was close behind him in the tent. And when he turned over for a better hearing, it focused itself unmistakably not 2 feet away, with a sound of weeping. Defago, upon his bed of branches, was sobbing in the darkness as though his heart would break. The blankets eventually stuffed against his mouth to stifle it.
Damn. And his first feeling, before he could think or reflect, was the rush of a poignant and searching tenderness. This intimate, human sound, heard amid the desolation about them, woke pity. It was so incongruous. I don't know what the fuck that means. Incongruous. Not in harmony or keeping with the surroundings or other aspects of something.
Hmm.
Huh. Incongruous. It was so incongruous, so pitifully incongruous, and so vain. Tears in this vast and cruel wilderness? Of what avail? He thought of a little child crying in mid-Atlantic. Then, of course, with fuller realization and the memory of what had gone before, came the descent of the terror upon him, and his blood ran cold.
Defago,
He whispered quickly.
what's the matter?
He tried to make his voice very gentle.
Are you in pain? Unhappy?
There was no reply, but the sound ceased abruptly. He stretched his hand out and touched him. The body did not stir,
Are you awake?
for it occurred to him that the man was crying in his sleep.
Are you cold?
He noticed that his feet, which were uncovered, projected beyond the mouth of the tent. He spread an extra fold of his own blankets over them. The guide had slipped down in his bed, and the branches seemed to have been dragged with him. He was afraid to pull the body back again, for fear of waking him. One or two tentative questions he ventured softly, but though he waited for several minutes, there came no reply, nor any sign of movement. Presently he heard his regular and quiet breathing, and putting his hand again gently on the breast, felt the steady rise and fall of beneath.
Let me know if anything's wrong,
He whispered.
or if I can do anything. Wake me at once if you feel queer. Damn.
He hardly knew what to say. What to say. He lay down again, thinking and wondering what it all meant. Defago, of course, had been crying in his sleep. Some dream or other had afflicted him, yet never in his life would he forget that pitiful sound of sobbing, and the feeling that the whole awful wilderness of woods listened. His own mind busied itself for a long time with the recent events, of which this took its mysterious place as one, and though his reason successfully argued away all unwelcome suggestions, a sensation of uneasiness remained, resisting ejection, very deep-seated, peculiar beyond ordinary.
Damn. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Alright. But sleep,
Chapter.
in the long run, proves greater than all emotions. His thoughts soon wandered again. He lay there warm and toast, exceedingly weary. The night soothed and comforted, blunting the edges of memory and alarm. Half an hour later, he was oblivious of everything in the other world about him. Yet sleep, in this case, was his great enemy, concealing all approaches, smothering the warding of his nerves.
As sometimes, in a nightmare, events crowd upon each other's heels, with a conviction of dreadfulest reality. Yet, some inconsistent detail accuses the whole display of incompleteness and disguise. So, the events that now followed, though they actually happened, persuaded the mind somehow that the detail which could explain them had been overlooked, in the confusion, and that therefore they were but partly true, the rest delusion. At the back of the sleeper's mind, something remains awake, ready to let slip the judgment.
All this is not quite real. When you wake up, you'll understand.
Dude, that was like that little fucking blob there. That was crazy.
As this is description's getting more like in depth now. Like it's getting
Yeah,
kind of getting a little freaky.
it's getting good, bro.
I mean, it was already good. Like I was already
Let's
enjoying it
get
quite a bit.
that's fair.
All right,
It's getting gooder.
gooder.
Yeah,
This is why we're doing these readings.
yeah, man. Good is a word.
All right. And thus, in a way, it was with Simpson. The events not wholly inexplicable. How do you pronounce that?
Explicable.
Inexplicable.
Inexplicable.
Okay. The events not wholly inexplicable or incredible in themselves, yet remain for the man who saw and heard them a sequence of separate facts of cold horror, because the little piece that might have made the puzzle clear lay concealed or overlooked.
So far as he can recall, it was a violent movement, running downwards through the tent towards the door, that first woke him and made him aware that his companion was sitting bolt upright beside him, quivering. Hours must have passed, for it was the pale gleam of the dawn that revealed his outline against the canvas. This time the man was not crying. He was quaking like a leaf. The trembling he felt plainly threw the blankets down the entire length of his own body. Defago had huddled down against him for protection, shrinking away from something that apparently concealed itself near the door flaps of the little tent.
Simpson Theropon?
Thereupon,
Theropon. Simpson thereupon called out in a loud voice some question or other. In the first bewilderment of waking, he does not remember exactly what, and the man made no reply. The atmosphere and feeling of true nightmare lay horribly about him, making movement and speech both difficult at first. Indeed, he was not sure where he was, whether in one of the earlier camps or at home in his bed at Aberdeen. The sense of confusion was very troubling.
and next, almost simultaneous with his waking, it seemed, the profound stillness of the dawn outside was shattered by a most uncommon sound. It came without warning or audible approach, and it was unspeakably dreadful. It was a voice, Simpson declares, possibly a human voice, hoarse yet plaintive, a soft, roaring voice close outside the tent, overheard rather than upon the ground, of immense volume, while in some strange way most penetratingly and seductively sweet, it rang out, too, in three separate and distinct notes or cries, that bore in some odd fashion a resemblance, far-fetched yet recognizable, to the name of the guide, Defago. Uh-oh.
Defago.
Defago.
Defago. The student admits he is unable to describe its quite
Intelligently.
intelligently. Jesus. For it was unlike any sound he had ever heard in his life, and combined a blending of such contrary qualities. A sort of windy crying voice, he calls it, as of something lonely and untamed, wild, of abominable power.
And even before it ceased, dropping back into the great gulfs of silence, the guide beside him had sprung to his feet with an answering, though unintelligible cry. He blundered against the tent pole with violence, shaking the whole structure, spreading his arms out frantically for more room, and kicking his legs impetuously. Let's see what that one means.
I think that just means like consistently.
Mm. Quickly and without thought or care. So, like,
Kinda.
yeah.
Hmm.
And kicking his legs impetuously free of the clinging blankets. For a second, perhaps two, he stood upright by the door, his outline dark against the pallor of the dawn. Then, With a furious, rushing speed, before his companion could move a hand to stop him, he shot with a plunge through the flaps of canvas, and was gone.
Damn.
And as he went, so astonishingly fast that the voice could actually be heard dying in the distance,
Oh shit.
he called aloud in tones of anguished terror that at the same time held something strangely like the frenzied exultation of delight.
Oh. Oh. My feet of fire. My burning feet of fire. Oh. Oh. This height and fiery speed.
What the hell? Yeah!
I don't know, bro. That's what he said.
That's hilarious. And then the distance quickly buried it, and the deep silence of very early morning descended upon the forest as before.
Damn. It had all come about with such rapidity. Rapidity?
Rapidity.
Rapidity?
Yep.
Okay. Rapidity that, but before the evidence of the empty bed beside him, Simpson could almost have believed it to have been the memory of a nightmare carried over from sleep. He still felt the warm pressure of that vanished body against his side. There lay the twisted blankets in a heap. The very tent yet trembled with the... What's that?
Vehemence?
Vehemence?
I've heard that word before, but I don't know the meaning.
Vehemence?
Vehemence. Vehemence. The
Vehemence.
display of strong feeling or passion.
Hmm.
Huh.
Vehemence of the impendous departure. The strange words rang in his ears as though he still heard them in the distance. Wild language of suddenly stricken mind. Moreover, it was not only the senses of sight and hearing that reported uncommon things to his brain. For even while the man cried and ran, he had become aware that a strange perfume, faint yet pungent, pervaded the interior of his tent. And it was at this point, it seems, brought himself by coincidence?
By the consciousness.
By the consciousness? Jesus.
Yeah.
But, oh my god, okay. Brought to himself by the consciousness that his nostrils were taking this distressing odor down into his throat. That he found his courage, sprang quickly to his feet, and went out.
The gray light of dawn that dropped cold and glimmering between the trees revealed the scene tolerably well. There stood the tent behind him, soaked with dew, the dark ashes of fire still warm, the lake white beneath a coating of mist, the islands rising darkly out of it like objects packed in wool, and patches of snow beyond among the clearer spaces of the bush. Everything cold, still, waiting for the sun, but nowhere a sign of the vanished guide. Still, doubtless, flying at frantic speed through the frozen woods, there was not even the sound of disappearing footsteps, nor the echoes of the dying voice. He had gone, utterly. There was nothing but the sense of his recent presence, so strongly left behind about the camp, and this penetrating, all-pervading odor.
And even this was not now rapidly disappearing in its turn. In spite of his exceeding mental perturbation, Simpson struggled hard to detect its nature and define it. But the ascertaining of his... Oh my god.
Ascertaining.
I know. But the ascertaining of an inclusive scent not recognized subconsciously at once. It was a very... subtle? Subtle? That's how you spell subtle?
Unfortunately, yes.
Really?
Yeah, it sucks. It's like subtle, but it's
I didn't know that's how you
subtle.
spell subtle.
It's weird.
Is a very subtle operation of the mind, and he failed. It was gone before he could properly seize or name it. Approximate description even seems to have been difficult. For it was unlike any smell he knew. Acrid?
Acrid.
Acrid, rather not unlike the odor of a lion. He thinks yet softer and not wholly unpleasing, with something almost sweet in it, that reminded him of the scent of decaying garden leaves, earth, and the myriad nameless perfumes that make up the odor of the big forest. Yet the odor of lions is the phrase with which he usually sums it all up.
Then it was wholly gone, and he found himself standing by the ashes of the fire, in a state of amazement and stupid terror that left him the helpless prey of anything that chose to happen. Had a muskrat poked its pointed muzzle over a rock, or a squirrel scuttled in that instant down the bark of a tree, he would most likely have collapsed without more ado and fainted. For he felt about the whole affair the touch somewhere of a great outer horror, and his scattered powers had not as yet had time to collect themselves into a definite attitude of fighting self-control.
Nothing did happen, however. A great kiss of wind ran softly through the awakening forest, and a few maple leaves here and there rustled trembling to earth. The sky seemed to grow suddenly much lighter. Simpson felt the cool air upon his cheek and uncovered his head, realized that he was shivering with the cold, and making a great effort realized next that he was alone in the bush, and that he was called upon to take immediate steps to find and secure his vanished companion.
Make an effort, accordingly, he did, though an ill-calculated and futile one. With that wilderness of trees about him, the sheet of water cutting him off behind, and the horror of that wild cry in his blood, he did what any other inexperienced man would have done in similar bewilderment. He ran about, without any sense of direction, like a frantic child, and called loudly without ceasing the name of the guide.
Defago! Defago! Defago!
He yelled, and the trees gave him back the name as often as he shouted, only a little softened.
Defago! Defago! Defago!
Yeah, it's imagining like a tree whispering his
Yeah,
ear.
me too.
Defago, Defago, Defago. It's like, He followed the trail that lay a short distance across the patches of snow, and then lost it again, where the trees grew too thickly for snow to lie. He shouted till he was hoarse, until the sound of his own voice in all that unanswering and listening world began to frighten him. His confusion increased in direct ratio to the violence of his efforts. His distress became formidably acute, till at length his exertions defeated their own object, and from sheer exhaustion he headed back to the camp again. It remains a wonder that he ever found his way. It was with great difficulty, and only after numberless false clues, that he at last saw the white tent between the trees, and so reached safely.
Exhaustion then applied its own remedy, and he grew calmer. He made the fire and breakfasted. Breakfasted?
He made the fire and breakfasted.
Huh.
Breakfasted? I guess breakfast is like break fast, kind of like in
Yeah,
one word.
yeah. Okay.
Huh.
He made
Makes
the
sense.
fire and breakfasted. Hot coffee and bacon put a little sense and judgment into
Oh.
him again, and he realized that he had been behaving like a boy. He now made another and more successful attempt to face the situation collectedly, and a nature naturally plucky coming to his assistance. He decided that he must first make a thorough
Thorough.
oh my god, first make as
first-
thorough a search as possible, failing success in which he must find his way into the home camp as best he could and bring help.
And this was what he did, taking food, matches, and rifle with him, and a small axe to blaze the trees against his return journey. He set forth. It was 8 o'clock when he started, the sun shining over the tops of the trees in a sky without clouds. Pinned to a stake by the fire, he left a note in case Defago returned while he was away.
Right there?
Yep.
This time, according to a careful plan, he took a new direction, intending to make a wide sweep that must sooner or later cut into indications of the guide's trail. And before he had gone a quarter of a mile, he came across the tracks of a large animal in the snow. And beside it, in the light, and smaller tracks of what were beyond question human feet, the feet of Defago. The relief he at once experienced was natural though brief. For a
Though
f-
brief.
I know, bruh. I got that. I got it.
Damn.
For a first sight, he saw in these tracks a simple explanation of whole matter. These big marks had surely been left by a bull moose that wind against it and blundered upon the camp, and uttered its signature cry of warning and alarm the moment its mistake was apparent. Defago, in whom the hunting instinct was developed to the point of uncanny perfection, had scented the brute coming down the wind hours before. His excitement and disappearance were due, of course, to his.
Huh.
Like a stutter, like to his.
We're due, of course, to his.
Yeah, like a stutter. I'm assuming.
Oh, okay. Then the impossible explanation at which he grasped faded, as common sense showed him mercilessly that none of this was true. No guide, much less a guide like Defago, could have acted in so irrational a way, going off even without his rifle. The whole affair demanded a far more complicated el- el- elucidation. Alright,
Elucidation.
elucidation. What does
Elucidation.
that,
I have
what
no
does that
idea.
mean?
I've heard it before, but I don't know what it means.
Explanation that makes something clear. Clear. Oh, okay, it's just a word for clarification.
Okay.
When you remember, demanded a far more complicated elucidation. When he remembered the details of it all, the cry of terror, the amazing language, the grey face of horror when his nostrils first caught the new odor, that muffled sobbing in the darkness, and, for this too, now came back to him dimly, the man's original aversion for this particular bit of country.
Besides, now that he examined them closer, these were not the tracks of a bull moose at all. Hank had explained to him the outline of bull hoofs of a cow's or calf's too. For the matter, he had drawn them clearly on a strip of birch bark, and these were wholly different. They were big, round, ample, and with no pointed outline, as of sharp hooves. He wondered for a moment whether bear tracks were like that. There was no other animal he could think of, for caribou did not come so far south as at this season, and even if they did, would leave hoof marks.
They were ominous signs, these mysterious writings left in the snow by the unknown creature that had lured a human being away from safety, and when he coupled them in his imagination with that haunting sound that broke the stillness of the dawn, a momentary dizziness shook his mind, distressing him again beyond belief. He felt the threatening aspect of it all, and, stooping down to examine the marks more closely, he caught a faint whiff of that sweet yet pungent odor that made him instantly straighten up again, frightened, fighting a sensation almost of nausea.
Then his memory played him another evil trick. He suddenly recalled those uncovered feet projecting beyond the edge of the tent, and the body's appearance of having been dragged towards the opening, the man's shrieking from something by the door. When he woke later, the details now beat against his trembling mind with concerted, concerted,
Concerted.
with concerted attacks. They seemed to gather in those deep spaces of the silent forest about him, where the host of the trees stood waiting, listening, watching to see what he would do. The woods were closing around him.
With the persistence of true pluck, however, Simpson went forward, following the tracks as best he could, smothering these ugly emotions that sought to weaken his will. He blazed innumerable trees as he went, ever fearful of being unable to find the way back, and calling aloud at intervals of a few seconds the name of the guide. The dull tapping of the axe upon the massive trunks, and the unnatural accents of his own voice became at length sounds that even he dreaded to hear, for they drew attention, without ceasing to his presence and exact whereabouts. And if it were really the case that something was hunting himself down in the same way he was hunting down another, with a strong enough effort, he crushed the thought out the instant it rose. It was the beginning, he realized, of a bewilderment utterly diabolical in kind that would speedily destroy him.
Damn. Although the snow was not continuous, lying merely in shallow flurries over the more open spaces, he found no difficulty in following the tracks for the first few miles. They went straight, as it ruled a line. Whenever the trees permitted, the stride soon began to increase in length. Still, it finally assumed proportions that seemed absolutely impossible for any ordinary animal to have made. Like huge flying leaps they became. One of these he measured, and though he seemed that stretch of 18 feet, god damn, must be
Dang.
somehow wrong. He was at complete loss to understand why he found no signs on the snow between the extreme points. But what perplexed him even more, making him feel his vision had gone utterly awry, was that Defago's stride increased in the same manner and finally covered the same incredible distances. It looked as if the great beast had lifted him with it and carried him across these astonishing intervals. Simpson, who was much longer in the limb, found that he could not compass even half the stretch by taking a running jump. Jesus Christ.
They're hauling ass. And the sight of these huge tracks running side by side, silent evidence of a dreadful journey in which terror or madness had urged to impossible results, was profoundly moving. It shocked him in the secret depths of his soul. It was the most horrible thing his eyes had ever looked upon. He began to follow them mechanically, absent-mindedly almost, ever peering over his shoulder to see if he too were being followed by something with a gigantic tread. And soon it came about that he no longer quite realized what it was they signified, these impressions left upon the snow by something nameless and untamed, always accompanied by the footmarks of the little French Canadian, his guide, his comrade, the man who had shared his tent a few hours before, chatting, laughing, even singing by his side. How long has that been? We're at chapter 5 now.
We're at 37 minutes.
Okay, I say we can go for a bit longer.
Okay. For a man of his years and inexperience, only a canny scout, perhaps grounded in common sense and established in logic, could have preserved even that measure of balance that this youth somehow or other did manage to preserve. Though the whole adventure otherwise, two things he presently noticed while forging pluckily,
Luckily. Yep.
pluckily, pluckily ahead must have sent him headlong back to comparative safety of his tent, instead of only making his hands close more tightly upon the rifle stock, while his heart, trained for the wee kirk, sent a wordless prayer winging its ways to heaven. Both tracks he saw had undergone a change, and this change, so far as it concerned the footsteps of this man, was in some
Decipherable.
undecipherable manner appalling. That was rough. That was hard. That was hard for me
Dude,
to read.
yeah, that's fair. Like, the writer, he just uses, like, big brain words, bro.
Well, it's not that. It's that they're old. Like
Well,
some
yeah.
of these words are like I've never heard before, and some of these words I never see. Like I know
Yeah,
what
that's
they
fair.
are, but I never see them like in writing.
Yeah,
Not very often, anyways.
that's fair. Yeah, when was this written? Like,
This was written in
19...
1910.
Okay, makes sense. It was in the bigger tracks he first noticed this, and for a long time he could not quite believe his eyes. Was it the blown leaves that produced odd effects of light and shade? or that the dry snow, drifting like finely ground rice about the edges, cast shadows and high lights? Or was it actually the fact that the great marks had become faintly colored? For round about the deep, plunging holes of the animal there now appeared a mysterious reddish tinge that was more like an effect of light than of anything that dyed the substance of the snow itself. Every mark had it, and had it increasingly, this indistinct, fiery tinge that painted a new touch of ghastliness into the picture.
But when wholly unable to explain or to credit it, he turned his attention to the other tracks to discover. If they too bore similar witness, he noticed that these had meanwhile undergone a change that was indefinitely worse, and charged with a far more horrible suggestion. For in the last 100 yards or so, he saw that they had grown gradually into the semblance of the parent tread. Imper-
Imperceptibly.
imperceptibly?
Yep.
Imperceptibly, the change had come about. Yet, unmistakably, it was hard to see where the change first began. The result, however, was beyond question smaller, neater, more cleanly modeled. They formed now an exact and careful duplicate of the large tracks beside them. The feet that produced them had therefore also changed, and something in his mind reared up with a loathing and with terror as he saw it.
Simpson, for the first time, hesitated, then, ashamed of his alarm and indecision, took a few hurried steps ahead. The next instant stopped dead in his tracks. Immediately in front of him, all signs of the trail ceased. Both tracks came to an abrupt end, on all sides. For 100 yards and more, he searched in vain for the least indication of their continuance. There was nothing.
The trees were very thick, just the big trees, all of them spruce, cedar, hemlock. There was no underbrush. He stood looking about him, all distraught. Bereft?
Bereft. What does that
Bereft?
mean? Deprived of or lacking something. A person sad and lonely, especially through someone's death or departure.
How's it pronounced? Bereft?
Bereft.
Bereft of any power of judgment. Then he set to work to search again, and again, and yet again. But always with the same result nothing. The feet that printed the surface of the snow thus far had now apparently left the ground. Ooh, the fuck?
Flew away. Yeah.
He got wings?
Damn. And it was in that moment of distress and confusion that the whip of terror laid its most nicely calculated lash about his heart. It dropped with deadly effect upon the sorest spot of all, completely unnerving him. He had been secretly dreading all the time that it would come, and come it did. Far overhead, muted by great height and distance, strangely thinned and wailing, he heard the crying voice of Defago, the guide.
Oh,
They got him.
I don't like that. The sound dropped upon him out of the still, wintry sky with an effect of dismay and terror. Unsurpassed, the rifle fell to his feet. He stood motionless, an instant, listening as listening as it were with his whole body, then staggered back against the nearest tree for support. Disorganized hopelessly in mind and spirit. To him, in that moment, it seemed the most shattering and
Yes.
dislocating experience he had ever known, so that his heart emptied itself of all feeling whatsoever, as be a sudden drought.
Hmm.
That's dialogue, right?
Yep.
Oh, oh, this fiery height. Oh, my feet of fire, my burning feet of fire.
Ran ran in far, beseeching accents of indescribable appeal. This voice of anguish down the sky, once it called, then silence, through all the listening wilderness of trees. And Simpson, scarcely knowing what he did, presently found himself running wildly to and fro, searching, calling, tripping over roots and boulders, and flinging himself in a frenzy of undirected pursuit after the caller. Behind the screen of memory and emotion, uh, which experience veils events, he plunged, distracted and half deranged, picking up false lights like a ship at sea, terror in his eyes and heart and soul, for the panic of the wilderness had called to him in that far voice, the power of untamed distance, the enticement of the desolation that destroys. He knew in that moment all the pains of someone hopelessly and irretrievably lost, suffering the lust and travail of a soul in the final loneliness, a vision of Defago, eternally hunted, driven and pursued across the skyey vastness of those ancient forests, fled like a flame across the dark ruin of his thoughts.
It seemed ages before he could find anything in the chaos of his disorganized sensations, to which he could anchor himself steady for a moment and think. The cry was not repeated. His own horse calling brought his own
Brought
horse calling brought no response. The indestructible forces of the wild had summoned their victim beyond recall and held him fast.
damn. Getty searched and called, it seems, for hours afterwards, for it was late in the afternoon when at length he decided to abandon a useless pursuit, and return to his camp on the shores of 50 Island Water. Even then he went with reluctance, that crying voice still echoing in his ears. With difficulty he found his rifle and the homeward trail. The concentration necessary to follow the badly blazed trees and a biting hunger that gnawed helped to keep his mind steady. Otherwise, he admits, the temporary aberration he had suffered might have been prolonged to the point of positive disaster. Gradually, the ballast shifted back again, and he regained something that approached his normal equilibrium.
But for all that, the journey through the gathering dusk was miserably haunted. He heard an innumerable following footsteps, voices that laughed and whispered, and saw figures crouching behind the trees and boulders, making signs to one another for a concerted attack. The moment he had passed, the creeping murmur of the wind made him start and listen. He went stealthily, trying to hide where possible, and making as little sound as he could. The shadows of the woods. Oh, hitherto?
Herto?
Hitherto?
Uh, Hitherto? Let's see there. Oh! Hold
Oh,
on.
what'd you do? Oh,
Uh, let's shoot. Hold on. I accidentally went to the very top. Oh no.
god damn it, Ben.
We got this. We got this. Shadows. Here we go. Um,
Number 6. What are you doing?
right there.
There you go.
There. And we're gonna see what the meaning was. Yeah. Hitherto. Until now, or until the point in time under discussion. Okay.
So hitherto.
Hmm.
The shadows of the woods, hitherto protective or covering merely, had now become menacing, challenging, and the oh my god,
Pageantry.
pageantry, the pageantry in his frightened mind masked a host of possibilities that were all the more ominous for being obscure. The presentment,
Present.
is that
Yep.
presentment? The
Presentment.
presentment of a nameless doom lurked, ill concealed behind every detail of what had happened.
It was really admirable how he emerged victor in the end. Men of riper powers and experience might have come through the ordeal with less success. He had himself tolerably well in hand, all things considered, and his plan of action proves it. Sleep being absolutely out of the question, and traveling an unknown trail in the darkness equally impracti- impract what the hell? Impracticable. Impracticable. He sat up the whole of that night, rifle in hand, before a fire he never for a single moment allowed to die down. The severity of the haunted vigil marked his soul for life, but it was successfully accomplished, and with the very first signs of dawn he set forth upon the long return journey to the home camp to get help. As before, he left a written note to explain his absence, and to indicate where he left a plentiful cache of food and matches, though he had no expectation that any human hands would find them.
How Simpson found his way alone by the lake and forest might well make a story in itself, for to hear himself tell it is to know the passionate loneliness of his soul that a man can feel. When the wilderness holds him in the hollow of the illimitable hand and laughs, it is also to admire his indomitable pluck.
He claims no skill, declaring that he followed the almost invisible trail mechanically and without thinking, and this doubtless is the truth. He relied upon the guidance of the unconscious mind, which is instinct. Perhaps, too, some sense of orientation known to animals and primitive men may have helped as well. For though all that tangled region, he succeeded in reaching the exact spot where Defago had hidden the canoe nearly 3 days before with the remark, "Strike due west across the lake into the sun to find the camp."
There was not much sun left to guide him, but he used his compass to the best of his ability, embarking in the frail craft for the last 12 miles of his journey with a sensation of immense relief that the forest was at last behind him. And, fortunately, the water was calm. He took his line across the center of the lake instead of coasting round the shores for another 20 miles. Fortunately to another oh my Fortunately to the other hunters were back the light of their fires furnished a steering point without which he might have searched all night long for the actual position of the camp.
It was close upon midnight, all the same, when his canoe grated on the sandy cove, and Hank, Punk, and his uncle, disturbed in their sleep by his cries, ran quickly down and helped a very exhausted and broken specimen of Scotch humanity over the rocks toward the dying fire. I'd say it's chapter 6.
Okay, that's
Have you?
I think that's a good place to call it.
Okay.
Can you
That was enjoyable.
yeah, it's really good. Can you scroll and see how much we got left?
We are about, we're, I'd say we're about like 60% done.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can finish that tomorrow. We should be able to finish this up tomorrow.
Yeah, it's fair. Get all of it done by then. That's where we are.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye
Yep.
bye.
Goodbye.